Kia ora Aotearoa, good evening and welcome to the Union Report, where we review the news week through the lens of industrial disputes with union leaders, commentators and politicians. Joining me tonight to review the week is Dr. Alistair Shaw, Executive Director of the New Zealand University Students Association and the Auckland Regional Chairperson of the PPTA, Lynley Hunter. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1. Why would parents send their children to school with unregistered teachers? Do the latest charter school revelations suggest the government is not listening to the sector's concerns? Issue 2. Are ACC tensions and uncontested private contracts at MFAT symptoms of a public service under stress? And Issue 3. Should unions be exempt from Holly Walker's lobbying disclosure bill? Plus, we'll wrap with a final thought, but let's start the show with Issue 1. Hekia Parata and John Banks launched charter schools last week and decided that unregistered teachers would be allowed to teach. Lynley, is this cost-cutting beneficial for children, or is it an ideological attack on teachers' unions?
I think you're right, it's an ideological attack on teachers' unions. Very much that a lot of the things that have been happening over the last few months with education initiatives such as the class size thing that was brought up and all of the things that come along with charter schools are against what we would see as proper, correct educational policy. And so that seems that that's what they're wanting to do, to privatise education in New Zealand by this sort of underhand manner.
Does it suggest, I mean, if we look at the larger classroom size fiasco, unqualified teachers, and the fact that most cabinet ministers have schools, kids at private schools, do they take public education seriously?
I think they take it very seriously, but their take on public education is that they want it to be more moved towards private education. Found it hugely amusing that John Key said that he would be quite happy to have his children taught by an unregistered teacher in a charter school, and certainly as a teacher I definitely would not want my children in that sort of situation. Because there's a huge amount more to being a teacher than just your qualifications in terms of your tertiary qualifications, as a science degree or an arts degree or something like that. The training in terms of vocational training to be a teacher is hugely important, and I've been teaching only for 8.5 years. I don't consider myself to be an expert, experienced teacher yet. It's an ongoing process of learning, and you can't just put anybody in front of a classroom.
Alistair, we have the 6th best public education system in the OECD. Why are we adopting education systems from countries lower on the rankings than us?
Well, that's a very good point, isn't it? And what we should be doing is looking at the school, the ones who are as good as us or better than us. And what do they have in common? Well, teachers are valued. It's a profession that people aspire to. And I think perhaps most importantly, it's the professionals who know what teaching is and know what education is who run it and determine what's going on. And I think that's the biggest thing here. There's a disconnect between the policy that gets made and the people who know something about the area being able to influence that. And if you look at England and the United States, they also have this attack on teachers, an attack on education, attack on the profession, an attack on the professionalism of the people who are engaged in this absolutely vital thing.
Is this being driven from an idea that we could maybe spend less on the budget for education if somehow we bring in cheaper contractors who can lower the cost of labour? Is that really what's going on?
I think it is. I think it is. We were talking with ministry officials just a couple of weeks ago, and they said we're not interested in putting more money into initial teacher education because there are enough teachers already. The class size debacle was about cutting jobs, reducing the number of teachers, reducing the costs, and none of it is driven by a desire to improve outcomes. I mean, let's be honest about that.
Lynley, public schools are being league tabled to death and national standards tested to death. Why won't charter schools be kept to the same rigorous standards as public schools?
It's an interesting question, because Catherine Isaacs, when she talked to the meeting I went to, the public information evening, she talked several different contradictory terms when she talked about charter schools. She talked about charter schools being creative, teachers being able to be creative within what they're doing, and at the same time talking about them being more rigorously controlled than otherwise. They talked about freedom versus traditional teaching in the same breath, and that these same charter schools going to be doing both. And then we've got all these contradictions going on that just don't make sense. And the other thing that I did was I asked Catherine Isaacs, what can charter schools do that we can't already do within the flexible state system that we already have? And she couldn't give me an answer to that. We can already do all of those things within the state school. And it just seems bizarre to have a system where the school can be free to choose a curriculum. One of the really good things about our schooling system is that it's transportable. And if my child leaves this school and goes to a school in Invercargill, they'll be learning the same things. If charter schools are not bound by that curriculum, then it means those students are going to be very disadvantaged if they move schools.
Should we have concerns as taxpayers that our money would go to fund a school which might be teaching some sort of quackery, like intelligent design? I mean, I would have a problem as a taxpayer thinking my money is propping up that kind of educational system, because I don't think that's education. That's something you do in your spare time. Shouldn't we, as taxpayers, be concerned about curriculums that are that easily interchangeable?
Absolutely, and that's the sorts of problems that they've had in the United States with schools having the freedom to set their own curriculum. Outside of what we would consider to be, science.
The norms, right? The science, right? The science. And because surely one of the points of a public education system is that you bring about citizens who have a basic understanding of the world and can actually be workers in a scientific enriched industry. If you've got an education system which is running all sorts of weird quasi stuff, don't you actually devalue the entire system?
I think so, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Alistair, the New Zealand Herald couldn't shout the praises of charter schools loud enough by claiming these schools would help children from lower socioeconomic areas because they will create more choice. Is choice the issue here, or is the issue that child poverty is what damages educational achievement, and the solution surely there is just more funding, isn't it?
Well, it's not more funding, it's just for schools. So that's right. There's clearly, we know, evidence tells us, although this isn't a area where policy is driven by evidence.
Not at the moment.
That evidence tells us that socioeconomic status is a major driver of school success, and in the tertiary level, the main barrier that keeps some smart kids out of tertiary is that their socioeconomic status meant that they didn't achieve at secondary school. So that's the main thing. And what we're talking about there is that for kids to have opportunity, they need to be in a decile school that is the same as everyone else. And that's a socioeconomic issue, not actually an educational issue. Teachers are picking up the deficiencies that the rest of our economic model generates. But I guess there's another issue, I suppose, which is that because they won't address that, and they're just wanting to slam teachers, they're devaluing the question of what education is as well. And there's a dreadful irony in the budget, which is that there used to be a category of allowances that you could get beyond the 200 weeks, which was if you did a course in the national interest.
Right.
Teaching was in the national interest, but now it's not.
That's out, is it? No longer that allowance. So surely extra choice isn't going to make children in lower socioeconomic communities better off educationally, is it? I mean, can choice really do that?
No, and I think that, I mean, the opening question, which was what could encourage someone, a parent, to send their kids to these schools, there is going to be an enormous amount of pressure. Right. We know that in the UK, their equivalent of charter schools were successful because they poured enormous amounts of money into them. And we know that there's going to be pressure on really talented teacher trainees to go and teach in these schools and make a difference or something like that. And I wonder if you said to a parent, look, the teachers in the school, may not be qualified, they may not be conforming with national standards, but look at the gear that they've got. Look how much money they've got in their school. Then you could imagine parents thinking, well, they've got this extra resource. Maybe that's the opportunity for my kid to succeed. And they will, pour money in to make them work. And what we saw in the UK is it made them work. Although if they're just being funded at the same level, then they're not achieving any results at all.
Final question to both of you quickly on this. Should public education, Lynley, be decided by a fringe right-wing party that only achieved 1.07% of the popular vote?
And was polling at 0.4% last
night. 0.4%, was it? Polling at 0.4% last night. Should that party have such a huge level of influence over the rest of the public education system?
Absolutely not. And the money that is going into those charter schools can flow directly on out into big business. So that we're talking not only about these schools being funded by the state, but that they can make profits out of that funding from the state. So
this isn't so much the tail that wagged the dog, this is the tail owning the dog, isn't it?
Well, as I said, in fact, it's ridiculous that things that weren't in the manifesto, which weren't talked about, are suddenly
policy.
The flags driving the whole sector. But it's actually a problem that politicians who don't know are determining education policy and determining what's in the national interest, and that those who do know are sidelined as being self-interested.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, does the ACC meltdown between the Minister and the former ACC Chairman, combined with vast uncontested contracts at MFAT, suggest that public service under pressure? Alistair, Green Party MP Kennedy Graham has criticised the untendered contracts at MFAT as an example of the recent cutbacks, leaving a public service so emptied that it doesn't have the intellectual grunt to provide advice on diplomatic matters. Is that hollowing out of public services on purpose?
Well, yeah, I think clearly. What we're seeing with in a number of areas is that even people who traditionally have been cheerleaders for neoliberal politics are being critical of the direction of this government. Treasury, for example, criticised the loan changes.
That's right.
They also produce vastly different estimations of the costing of the SOE sales, and for of the handouts to encourage people to keep their shares. So so the government doesn't even want that advice. The problem, I think, with contract advice versus the public service is that the public service is funded to provide impartial advice.
Right.
And it's their jobs and whether they get another contract doesn't depend upon it.
Right.
Whereas these contract advice, you go back to that person again if they give you the advice that you want to hear.
Right.
And I think that's
how you get to be uncontested.
Well, yeah. Is there the grunt there? I mean, our public service is, there's a lot of bright people. And capable people, but they've when they have had their number of people who can be employed, this fixed.
Kneecap.
People leave. It's bound to lead to a capacity problem.
Lynley, when it comes to public service, everything must be transparent and above board. When it comes to the private sector, contracts can go uncontested and charter schools can create their own curriculum. Is there a double standard being endorsed by the government here? Public sector, we need to know everything. The private sector, it's commercially sensitive. Yep,
absolutely. And I think the agenda of this government and the ACT Party and coalition with them is to fragmentise and pull apart our public service system across all fronts. And we find that in the PPTA, in terms of being able to get access to the Ministry of Education, to have questions answered by the staff.
So the PPTA has trouble actually getting really hold of the Minister. Surely the Minister should pick up the phone anytime the PPTA calls.
So the Ministry, as opposed to
right.
Yeah, that's what's good.
Alistair, does the latest ACC meltdown between former ACC Chairman John Judge and the Minister Judith Collins impact on how far public servants will go to push through controversial policy? I mean, here we had a situation, ACC were told to be very, very aggressive with people who were applying. They were very, very aggressive with people who were applying. Now you suddenly have people being sort of left out to dry. Does that make it difficult for public servants?
Oh yeah, and you can see actually the way this government treats anybody who criticises them. This is symptomatic of that. So every beneficiary who says I can't survive there's some trawl into her situation to dredge up and make her the subject of unwanted media attention and gross breaches of privacy. Public servants, I mean, they need to be defended. And you can see why people don't want to put their names to things.
And surely that's not good for the long-term support of the public service that you need to run a country for, sure.
And it's very short-term, very short-sighted policy, because what we're going to see is that we're going to see bad decisions.
Right.
So we're not going to have good contested advice, we're going to make bad decisions, and it's going to come back and haunt us.
Is this one of the problems of Moby, where Joyce has put together a super ministry, and instead of getting 4 different sets of advice maybe on policy, he's just getting one piece of paper that has the advice? If you lose that interdepartmental scrutiny of policy, then you're just getting yes men, aren't you?
I think that's what they want.
Lynley, don't public servants need to know that they won't be hung out to dry by their ministers, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things about the public service that has been a strength, I think, is that those public servants carry on through regardless of who's in government. And you have this consistency of understanding of whatever sector it is that they're working in. And certainly in the education sector, we're starting to lose some of that, core knowledge that's held within the ministry, because you've got that situation that, first of all, you've got people that, understaffed, underfunded, and then you're going to have a higher turnover of staff when it's not so, secure a position, and you're being overworked and all of those things. So, the strength of our public service has been that continuity and that breadth of knowledge that's held within the public service that the MPs don't actually have.
Isn't it concerning if you've got a government that seems to be sacking more people than they're hiring at a time when we've got 6.7% unemployment? I mean, isn't that the wrong message to be sending? A final question to both of you on this then. Is the starving off of funding to public services a specific tactic to force people to turn to the private sector? I mean, is that what the idea is here?
I think it's about a system of closure around thinking.
Right.
And so we can see it in the Official Information Act review. Yes. And this attempt to reduce the transparency and openness of government.
That's right.
And we see a number of policy changes where the government's unable to articulate what the research is or what the evidence is about why we should be doing that. And it's leading to this sort of ideological drive around policies rather than things that we know are going to work.
Is it bizarre that empirical evidence seems to have just taken a back seat to crazy rhetoric?
We have, plenty of very good New Zealand-based research, and I know that in the education sector, that's just universally ignored by the government, or it's small pieces of it, cherry-picked out that don't actually fit with the overall results of the research.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, should unions be exempt from Holly Walker's lobbying disclosure bill? Alistair, Charles Cheval's suggestion that unions be exempt from the lobbying disclosure bill seems based on the idea that unions aren't evil, whereas private lobbyists are interested only in maximising profits for their interest group. Is that a position that can be defended?
Well, unions aren't evil.
No, of course not.
But I think we want more openness, not less openness. There are compliance costs questions,
Sure,
which I'm hoping will be sorted out in the select committee. But for NGOs, for unions, members and those who are being supported by those agencies should be proud of the work that they do and proud of the fact that they're engaging in the political process.
Sure.
Yeah, but as I said, I mean, there's significant questions about information sharing and openness at the moment. And I think it probably sends the wrong message to say that some people should be exempt from that.
Sure. I mean, the NZUSA, for example, wouldn't have any problem with anyone knowing that you were sitting down with any members of Parliament, right? I mean, that's your job.
Exactly. I think our members would expect it.
Right. They'd be a little angry if you weren't.
That's right. And I think students can have some comfort that there's somebody doing that for them.
Lynley, this bill is supposed to shed light on sinister lobbyists who have open access to ministers. Should unions be exposed to that same level of scrutiny?
I'm unsure of this one because one of the things that I'm concerned about is that the books, if you like, will be opened for unions and other NGOs, etc. But that the big business interests will still largely take part behind closed doors. And so what we'll be doing by supporting this bill may be just to open ourselves up to scrutiny that won't actually be applied.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Business.
Question to both of you: will knowing who ministers are talking to change the relationship between lobbyists and politicians? What do you think? If everyone knows who they're talking to?
Well, maybe it will lead to a rigour around decision making, which means that that politicians would need to say, "I've taken this position because of this evidence."
Right.
And that seems like a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got deals as openly questionable as the Sky City Convention Centre, where the Prime Minister himself has involved himself in the deal. I mean, does this even matter when you've got a government that does what it likes?
that may well be true.
I mean, is it going to change that much?
No, I suspect not. Like I said, I think the behind closed doors deals would still continue.
Final question to both of you then on this. Is including unions within the disclosure bill something we should agree to do, because leaving the left's lobbyists out of it while demanding the right wing's lobbyists are in it would quickly unravel any momentum to actually pass this, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I agree in universality, and the rules should apply.
Yeah.
And I think Lynley's right though. If it becomes the same as campaign finance reform, which there's just another device for businesses to be able to funnel their money.
Yeah, another place to wash the cash.
Then that's a concern.
Yeah.
But I think openness and requiring that decisions be evidence based. That's we need to get there.
Yeah. Should it be something that we just take on the chin, because if we're in, the others will be in as well?
I think if it's an open, transparent system, there's no reason why the unions would be resistant to that at all.
No. I mean, it's pretty clear what their position is. Give workers some more. Okay, thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with final word. Alistair, your final word this week is?
Well, I wanted to talk about Charanpreet Dalawal. A tragic situation.
Terrible.
But what it tells us and reminds us is that here's a student who's also a worker. And that connection, that students are part of everything else, has been highlighted by it. So students as workers are vulnerable and need to be defended and supported in both of their roles. And it reminds us also that students aren't some fringe element who are not part of society. Students are part of everything, and every single person you go to who is credentialed through a qualification, they've been a student. And so the importance of tertiary education throughout our whole society in terms of delivering the standards that we require is something that everybody should be part of. And my heart goes out to his mother and his family, of course, but remembering that he's a student as well as a worker.
And him being a student actually made him much more vulnerable in that position, didn't it? Because as I understand the case there, it was a last minute work change. He was brought in at the last minute because he was available being a student. I think he was showing around the place once with a small flashlight and just left.
Oh, he was required to turn up with his own flashlight.
Yeah.
And so he didn't even know what the spec was required. So he brought a little pen light.
Yeah.
And he was shown by somebody who was wanting to run away.
Yes, that's right.
And then just left.
Terrible situation. And Lynley, your final word this week is?
Charter schools, one of the main reasons that they've been proposed is to address the so-called tail in education.
Yeah.
And as I think we've said previously, that the key to improving educational outcomes for the poor performing students in our society is largely a social one. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening every day, and those are the issues that need to be addressed outside of vote education to mean that children are rocking on up to school ready to learn.
Yeah.
The other side of it is that teachers, I mean, we just are despairing in our jobs when we have children that we can't help because we don't have the resources and the funding to do it.
No.
We don't have the specialists to assess them in our schools, and that's hugely concerning to most teachers.
Yeah.
My message to the ministry is to ask teachers what we need to improve student learning outcomes. We're the experts in education. And I've just got a misquote from President Woodrow Wilson that I'll read so I don't get it wrong.
Please do.
We are not here merely to make a living. We are here in order to enable the world to live more amply, with greater vision, with a finer spirit of hope and achievement. We are here to enrich the world. And I think that applies to teaching.
Amen. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Lynley. That's it for the show. Check out our Facebook site for ongoing union campaigns and actions, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter account for all the latest show updates. Thank you for watching Aotearoa. Join us again 8 PM next Monday for the Union Report here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Good night, New Zealand.